verified that the following functions are inverse of each other. So let's verify it by doing the f of g of x. And then we'll do it again for the other one as g of f of x, right? So when you do f of g of x, we got to start from left to right. So left equation, or the function in this case, is the f of x. So let's copy the f of x as exactly as it is. So the f of x is cube root of 8x minus 1 all divided by 5. So now you're going to replace the x with the g of x. So I need to rewrite the cube root of 8. The x, I'm going to leave a blank where the x used to be, and I need to insert the g of x inside it. So this is 125x cubed plus 8. Close that parentheses, and then there is still a 1 at the end of it, and there is still all of it divided by 5. Once you have it, now what? What do we cancel first? What do we cancel next? All that. How do you know what to decide? Well, if there is a parentheses, then typically we cannot change or cancel out something that's in the parentheses with something that's outside it. In other words, the plus 1 and the minus 1 are off limits because the minus 1 is outside the parentheses and the plus 1 in it. So those will be done later on. And the 5, same logic. There's a 5 in the denominator, but there is no 5 to cancel anywhere in the problem. So the 5 is off limits as well. So that leaves you with the blue part and the red 8. Well, because the red 8 is outside it, like I said, you can't really cancel it. But in this case, because that 8 is being multiplied by the blue parentheses, as long as it's being multiplied and there is no plus, there is no minus in the middle of it, then you can easily cancel out the 8. And then that leaves you with the 125 in the cube root, 125 x cubed plus 1, and the minus red 1, all divided by red 5. Okay, because we cancel the 8s out, the parentheses are useless. You can just get rid of it. So now the plus 1 and the minus 1, they should hopefully cancel out. So that leaves you with the cube root of 125 x cubed divided by 5. Now, what I see happen many times is that people often want to cancel the 125 over 5 and reduce it into a number. Well, you can't do that because that 5 is completely outside the cube root, right? So if that's the case, then that 125 has to be transformed into something so that everything in the cube root has the exponent of 3. Now the x has an exponent of 3. That doesn't mean the cube and the cube root would cancel out. They do usually, but the problem is if you cancel them out, the cube root will still be there because of the 125 is still in the cube root. So then we got to change that 125 into something to the third power. And that, if you do your algebra on the side of the paper, what to the third equals 125. So that's just a little bit trial and error thingy. 5 to the third will give you x cubed remaining at the end of it, all divided by 5. At this point, because everything in the cube root is being cubed, we can now cancel this cube with the exponent of 3 and the exponent of 3. So that leaves you with the 5x over 5. And now the 5s will simply cancel out, leaves you with the x all by itself. And you want that to be an x, nothing else, not x squared, not a coefficient in front of x besides 1, just the x all by itself. Same process on the other side, and the other answer better be an x as well. So now I need to rewrite this from left to right, which is g has to go first. So g function is given to us as 125x cubed plus 1 all divided by 8, and then remove the x replace it with the other function, which is the cube root of 8x minus 1 all divided by 5. And then the cube will still be there. The plus 1 will still be there, all divided by 8 at the end of the thing. So there you go. Now the question is, what do we cancel first? Same logic applies here. The red one, the red minus 1 is in the parentheses and inside the cube root sign, and the blue plus 1 is completely outside it. Therefore, the ones will not cancel at this time. So they're off limits. Same logic applies with the 8. I realize there's an 8 in the cube root in the parentheses, but the blue 8 is completely outside the entire cube root. So the 8 and the blue 8 and the red 8 will not cancel at this point. So that makes the 8 is off limits. Same logic applies with the 125. It is completely outside the cube root, so 125 is also off limits. Same thing with the cube. The blue cube is off limits as well. So that leaves you with what's in the red parentheses. Well, there is nothing that cancels out in the red parentheses. So you're stuck back to square one. What can we do? Well, people think that this blue cube cancels with the cube root, the red cube root. They can't cancel them out, but the problem is that 5 doesn't have cube root on top of it. Okay, so 5 is completely outside the cube root. So if you cancel the cube root with the cube, then what about the 5? Because the 5 is also in the parentheses, but outside the cube root. So to cancel the 5 out, or we need to do something a little bit different. We're going to pause canceling for the moment. What we're going to do is basically separate the numerator and the denominator in the red fraction. So leave the blue part exactly as it is, except one minor difference. I'm going to take that red cube root of 8x minus 1. I'm going to put that in parentheses, raise it to the third power, and I'm going to take that 5 at the bottom, raise that to the third power. So what I'm doing is I'm taking that cube that's outside the red parentheses, and I'm going to bring it back in the green parentheses so that the numerator and the denominator, it has its own cube. Okay, so now the plus blue 1 will still be there, and the red 8, the blue 8 at the bottom will still be 8 at the bottom. So all we did was we separated the numerator and the denominator and give it its own cube. Why do we do this? So now we can easily cancel the blue cube and the cube root. It doesn't affect the red 5 at all because red 5 has its own cube separately, so it's not going to be affected. So what we can do instead is you're going to take that 5 cube on the bottom and change it into a number in a minute. But first, cube cancel out. That leaves you with the 8x minus 1 all by itself. The cube is gone. The cube root is gone. 5 cube at the bottom right here. Denominator will give you 125. You still have the plus 1 at the end. You still have the 8 at the very bottom, the denominator. So now, just like we canceled the 8 in the first one over here, that and that 8, let's also cancel out the 125 for the same logic. It's 125 times the fraction. That means you could cancel out the 125 completely gone. So that leaves you with the 8x minus 1. Because the 125 is gone, you no longer need the parentheses. The plus 1 will still be there, all divided by 8. So now take out the plus 1, cancel them out, leaves you with the 8x over 8. And now cancel the 8's, leaves you with the x all by itself. So both must be x to prove that they're inverse of each other.